Okay, hello, this is Rank Carcass. I'm going to focus this video on kind of like the American strategy for the Atlantic side. Um, we'll just go over this a little bit, and then I'm going to do another video here on the Pacific, and then maybe a conclusion that ties them together. Um, so, usually you're not going to split the U.S. in distinct East and West unless you have that mythical option where you have so many players that you had to split the U.S. in half and have one guy control one side and one guy control the other side. I've ended up having that once in our games here, and it worked out okay. And if you're going to do that, it's going to be just like the British, where whoever happens to be the one who holds the capital of the home country has the final say on any kind of policy as to declarations of war or approval to move through a strait or canal, all that fun stuff. So I'm not going to go into that anymore. We'll just leave that as that. Realistically, it's going to be very hard to get yourself that many players. That's 8 players on this map. It's possible, but yeah, it's going to be hard to get that many players in. So I'm just going to cover the Atlantic here. Now, you'll notice that the U.S. Navy is rather substantial in comparison to anything that the Axis has on the Atlantic side. That U.S. Navy's got 3 capital ships, 2 aircraft, 2 cruisers, and 3 destroyers. That more than beats what the Italians here with their 1 capital ship, 1 cruiser, 2 destroyers, and a bunch of coastals and torpedo boat destroyers. And then the Germans up there, they've got 1 cruiser, 1 destroyer, a sub, and a couple of those obsolete units, torpedo boat destroyer, and a coastal sub. So realistically, they have no chance against you, naval-wise. And same with the British. The British have enough that you both double, or more than double, the Axis powers on this side of the map. So realistically, you're not going to need to build a giant navy on this side. What you will notice, when it comes to land units, you've only got 2 infantry. That's it. Now, I've seen games where we have a sea lion thing going on. So I'm just going to move across the map here, and let's just get it right about there. So I've seen games where you have this massive sea lion buildup going on by the Germans. I'm just going to show that with let's just say that this is an aircraft carrier here, and let's get 1 transport out. Yeah. Carrier and a transport. So this is my massive fleet, so to speak. I know it's not really, but I'm just using it as a marker. I don't have any realistic task force markers here that I feel like using. Actually, I do. There we go. Let's just do that. We'll use one of these things. Throw German roundel on there. Alright, so let's say the Germans have a nice big fleet, and who knows what has happened during the game. Maybe the British have been wiped out, had their navy wiped out, or maybe they went into the Med, or they decided to go after the Japanese or some crazy thing, and just pretty much they've been annihilated fleet-wise. Well, the Germans are now staged up to do a sea lion. Now, sea lion is not a horrible option for Germany, and this will tie into the Americans pretty soon here. But they don't have to stage up here anymore if they have France. Yeah, let's knock everything around. They could be staging up down here at this shipyard that they've taken over from the French, right? They're placing their navy there. They're building it up. They got this big invasion force, lots of transports, lots of ground units, and it looks like they're going to be coming up on the sea line. And this happened in one of our games, and then you're thinking, oh, okay, sea line, that's, it's bad, but it's not that bad, right? So the Americans figure that they got this under control, so they moved their fleet up into the British waters. Well, what that did, right, so the Americans moved this fleet out, into British waters here to try and defend, because they couldn't quite get here all in one move, right? So now the Germans do this: 1, 2, 3. Well, from here they can go 1, 2 with their transports, battleships, everything, and they can hit anything on the U.S. coast, including Florida. Right? That's a bad go. Now the Americans are in scramble mode, and they're trying to come home. Right? So that's not good, right? Americans have decided to come up here, then they move over to there, and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to help the British out in case of sea lion will annihilate the fleet. Well, now the Germans are down here. They're out of range of the Americans. So is the coastline. So the Germans may sacrifice this unit and move them 1, 2 into there, or they could go up there, or they could split off and go here, here, and down here, right, and come down to the Panama. Because if they can shut down, here, let's move this back a bit. If the Germans can shut down Panama Canal, the entire Pacific Fleet can't come through, right? So the Germans can split off from here, and they can take off everything on the coast from here and here and here, and then come down to here and take out Panama. Now that's a bad spot for the Americans to be. Very bad. And especially when you've only been building Navy because you're worried about getting transports across. You haven't really been building up a lot of ground forces. So you only got the one dude here, the one dude there. You're not doing very good. If you want, you can bring a tactical, an infantry, and a light tank across from the other side. That's not enough, right? That's not enough to beat off what looks like a planned invasion on London as a sea line. So if they take out this capital here in Washington from this sea zone, guess what? The Americans lose all their money, and it goes to the bank. So on the American turn, they can build nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because they have no money in the bank to build anything from. They can move their capital to either New York, Chicago, or on the other side of the map, San Francisco. But if that happens, they have no money, right? There's relocated capital, no money. That's a bad turn for the Americans. And if that happens, and you lose this place, well, you now gave the Germans a shipyard, which they can use for a supply path, and a minor factory, because any taken over factory reverts to a minor. So they can build one unit there. Plus they can build a militia there. And if they have that in New York as well, and then they move in and do the same thing in Texas, you just lost most of your production. And the same one here down in the southeastern U.S., or Florida, whatever you want to call it there. If they take that as well, you're realistically, Germany's got America by the balls at that point in time. And it can be devastating. I mean, even if this Navy comes back and wipes out the German Navy, that's okay for the Germans because they've got land, they've got forces on the land, they've got factories to build. Like, you're going to have to spread out your Navy to blockade this stuff, right? Germany can keep building a new Navy on this side and come across. Now, this will typically happen earlier in the game, so never allow the U.S. to not have a lot of ground units, because this is a bad thing. No. Very bad. So the U.S. doesn't want to do that. So don't focus purely on the naval game, right? Or the air campaign, where, it's great as the U.S. to have the mobility of the Navy and the aircraft to get across the Atlantic in a hurry, right? Get across here and get up into London and help out the British, and from there do a staging area where you can harass the Germans so that they don't have the ability to come across, right? Same thing has happened in some of our games. If Italy gets Gibraltar, they can stage up here, and from here they are literally how does it work here again? 1, 2, 3, right? They can almost reach that in one turn. Or if they take out Portugal, this base here, straight across, one turn back and forth, especially if they own both, they can start their own shuck against the US. That's bad. All right, so don't focus only on fast movers to get out here. Keep maintaining yourself some defensive units on the ground, especially early in the game. You don't start with a lot. You can get surprise attacked by the Germans when you're making 16 bucks a turn in like I don't know, the late 30s, early 40s. I mean, you'll go to full production, but you'll have no money in the bank because they took out your capital. So that just means you collect more money at the end for your new capital, which has no units in it, which can be taken over again, and so on and so on. So be very cognizant. America looks like it's very far away. It's hard to take, and yes, it is hard to take. But if the American player is complacent, it's very easy for the German, Italian, or Japanese player to move in and hit that hard. All right, which is probably why we have the Monroe Doctrine rules. That way, if anybody attacks anything on this side, Americans are like, "Oh, that's too close. We declare war on you back," so to speak. All right, so that would be the basics of the Pacific here on defense. You don't want to set yourself up. Now, just like let's just move that Navy back here. Now, just like the let's just say we use a transport here as an example. Or you know what's even better? We're going to use one of these, and we're going to use one of these. Now this is the American fleet. All right. Well, you're starting off in C-Zone 41. You come 1, 2, 3, which is the max movement that any ship in the game can do with a naval base for the +1 bonus movement. And you can take out Portugal, or if this is German controlled, you can take that Navy base out, either one. And now you have the ability to shuck troops back and forth, right? Build yourself a factory or something. That way you don't just have to rely on the shuck, you can also build up extra troops here. From here, you can stage yourself up and hit Normandy, or you can come through the Med, hit something over there. Not a horrible plan, and this is the only location where the US can cross the Atlantic in one turn. Is either to this base or that base. And this one's no use to you because it's British, and if you take it over, you got to give it back to the British. So what's the point, right? You can't use it as Americans in this game. You can only use your own bases. So what you would need to do is you would need to make this an American base, or this an American base, to get the bonus move of your empty transports to go home, pick up again, and come back. Right? So, and that's kind of that, right? Your other option is to go the longer route, where you come up through here and you go one from here, 1, 2, 3, and you're paused, and you got to go here, dump them off, and then it's 2 to get back, 2 turns to get back, 2 turns to get forward, right? It's a longer shuck. You need more groups of transports. You need two, one that's gonna arrive empty, one that arrives here loaded, one that delivers empty, or one that empties itself, and another one that's empty here coming back. So if that's the case, you're gonna have to escort those transports along the way. So that one's also equally possible. This one tends to be more beneficial. Either one of these two. It's not like the solid plan. There's ways that the Germans can pigeonhole you and doesn't work out that well, but yeah, that's a relatively safe play there. All right, so I'm now gonna go. Yeah, so I've covered how weak you are at the start and how complacency can kill the Americans. So build land troops. It's happened in a couple of our games on both sides of the map where the Americans think that you got this big navy, so no one's going to reach them, and then all of a sudden they either lose their navy or the navy's out of position. You don't even have to lose it; you just move it to the wrong spot. and open up something else. So be cognizant of what's going on. All right. Yeah. So how not to get annihilated is America on this side. And two possible ways to get a transport shuck going. There's other ways you can do it. You can also align Brazil, come down to here, and then from here you can come in this way or build a base here or whatever you got to do. Take over Rio de Janeiro, the Canary Islands. Another one I've seen is the Americans attack and take over the Azores and build a base there. And from there they can move to here, and from here they can reach the English Channel or here or into the Med. So that's another option. It's basically the same option as taking Portugal though, except you got to wait the 3 turns it takes you to build a base afterwards. So it's a 4-turn build. Kind of slow, kind of projects what your plan is, and the last thing you want to do is give the Germans a clear idea of where you're coming from. All right, so there's that. Another thing to keep in mind is if you're building a lot of bombers or aircraft, let's see, from this air base you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so you can't quite reach there. Maybe you put a carrier in the middle there, and you just keep dumping the guys off the carrier, flying some planes, and landing them on the carrier, and just doing that with using the carrier like a transport for a shuck, right? Giving an artificial landing zone in the middle. The Azores works great for that one as well, though, so there's another reason why the Azores might be helpful. All right, and by doing that, if you develop a huge air force by the Americans over here, start throwing in some bombers that can reach there in 1 turn, and maybe bringing an airborne along with your bombers, then a nice airborne invasion by the Americans in conjunction with a transport invasion by the British can make a good 1-2 punch on on Fortress Europe. All right, so I'm going to leave it at that for the some possible strategy ideas. I kind of basically covered your options to align the Pan-American nations. That's not a horrible way to go either. Just don't get too focused on that, because there's a lot of money down there, and you're relying on a low probability dice rolls. So it's entirely possible that you don't get anything. So handy, but if you get it, that's the problem. So another thing, reinforce Panama. Don't give the Japanese or the Germans the opportunity to take that away from you. It's got a coastal gun that points into the Pacific. That's it. There's no fort. You build a fort there, protects on both sides. Maybe drop off a transport worth a couple infantry or something in a fort. That'll make Panama a less juicy target. It'll cost too much to take it, and stalls the invasion one way or another. So there you go. All right, I'm going to leave you there. So this is Rank Carcass. That was my brief overview on Pacific strategy, on a couple of variations of Pacific strategy for the Americans in the Atlantic strategy for the Americans, and how they can affect Europe, South America, and Africa. All right, and I'm going to be doing another video here on the Pacific. So see you later. Have a good one, and enjoy yourselves. Bye.